Record. Today, I'd like to talk to you about feedback. When to accept it, what it means in terms of learning. Can you actually read this? Why it's important, and when we can easily ignore it. But I needed to get something from my basement this morning for that. It's in here. Why is it necessary to talk about feedback? The thing is that as soon as you produce something, as soon as you do something that can be seen in public, people will give you feedback without being asked for it. And feedback is always a gift because someone explains their own view of something. And in this video, I simply want to explain to you when it is probably necessary to listen to that and how you can also protect yourself from feedback that might actually harm you. And that's what I need the paper for. Before we talk about feedback, I would like to introduce you to a model that I use when I think about learning. It's from Ken Robinson, who you probably have heard of. And in his book, Finding Your Element, he presents this clever model of what he thinks learning is or how it could be understood. And he simply describes it as a two-world journey. He says we all live in the same outside world. The world of other people, the world of politics, the world of everything that's happening around us. However, no one can experience this outside world directly, right? Because we can only ever experience this outside world through our inner world. Our inner world being the world of our senses, the world of our experience that we've had in the past. And so learning happens basically at this border between the inner and the outside world. So for example, if I see something in the outside world, I will only perceive it through my inner world. So what does that mean? If you, for example, do something, you write a blog post, you do something creative, and I see it, I can only perceive it through my inner world. So I will always just experience that through everything else I have seen before. And so the image of what you're doing exists in my head. So if I start to give you feedback, that will not be my clear observation, that will be my interpretation of what you did. And that's very important. There is a really great quote about observation by Jiddu Krishnamurti, which I believe makes sense here. The ability to observe without evaluating is the highest form of intelligence, by Jiddu Krishnamurti. What does that mean? Each and every one of us, we cannot objectively observe. That's a craft that you actually need to practice. Most of the things that we say, most of the feedback we give is highly subjective. And that means if someone presents their feedback to us, we always need to keep that in mind. That this only ever exists, this only ever is designed from a very, very highly subjective standpoint. All right, so does that mean that we should actually completely ignore any external feedback? Because if everyone is just presenting their very subjective view, do we actually need it? And yes, we do, for two reasons. Sometimes we simply need other people to make us aware of the things that we don't see ourselves. There is a cool model called the Johari Window, which you might have heard of. It is named after the two guys, Joseph Luft and Harrington Ingham, who designed that model in psychology. And what it describes is that we all have these 4 quadrants of things that we might or might not be aware of. So these things, they are known to self. Here is everything which is called arena. That's my public self. That's something other people see of me, something that I put out there and I'm aware of putting it out there. Like this video, for example. So over here we have everything that's not known to myself, and here is known to others, not known to others. Now, here are my personal secrets, if you will. Here's everything that only I know about myself and I'm not showing to the public. Interesting is that down here, that's not known to anyone, right? So there might be some things that I don't know about myself, but others also don't know about myself. So everyone basically is unaware of this. But now, what's important for feedback is these are my blind spots, right? So these are things that people see when they look at me. That's something that they understand when they watch my work, when they see what I create. But I'm unaware of this. Of course, if they tell that to me and say, look, when I look at your work, when I look at what you do, I see all these things. Now the question is, when should or should I not accept this? And of course, what comes into play here is our emotions, especially the things that trigger us. When someone says to me, for example, it looks as if you are actually looking to get more attention from the outside. If that triggers me, it tells me that it's probably something that's true. I believe that this is actually a topic that I'm currently trying to figure out, that I'm actually in the middle of dealing with, that I'm actually interested in what people say. I can't kind of get away from this. So if it does trigger me, there might be some truth to it. That's something to keep in mind. But we wouldn't otherwise be made aware of these blind spots if it weren't for external feedback. So that's really important. By the way, if you're wondering how much paper does this guy use, I use all the cards and all the paper that I've used before, right? So I just got it out of my basement and my closet because I thought it would be good to do it on paper. The second reason why I believe feedback is extremely important is if we look at the work of Carl Anders Ericsson, who for the whole of his academic life tried to figure out what actually turns people into experts. So when does anyone become an expert? And he wrote it all up in a great book which is called Peak: Secrets from the New Science of Expertise. And in this book he presents his method called deliberate practice. So when looking at how do experts actually practice, what do they do in order to become experts, he developed this method called deliberate practice. And looking at the experts he worked with, the moment when their success and their progress really kickstarted and really developed was when they got external feedback from someone who's a pro at doing what they are trying to do. That's very important. So, for example, if you want to get better at public speaking, you want to get better at making videos, you want to get better at your business. If you know someone who's actually good at what you're trying to do, try to get their feedback. So, of course, I wouldn't discuss my business ideas with someone who's absolutely unexperienced in business. It might be interesting, but when it comes to the point of actually making new decisions, I don't think that I would rely on their feedback, and I would actually rely on their opinion. And Carl Anders Ericsson showed this in his book, in his work, that when someone is trying to become a world-class violinist, if she starts working with someone who's way ahead, then they also started to develop at a completely different pace. What does this mean for feedback? When should we accept it, and how do we actually find out whether someone's feedback is valuable to me, or I can easily ignore it? And for that, I want to give you a thought at the end of this, which I think, I'm not entirely sure, I think I saw first in Seth Godin's work, but it's not his thought. So the thought is from an author, as far as I remember. And she said, make a list. Make a list of the people that are actually good at what you want to get better at. It's a list of 5 people, maybe 10 maximum. Take this list and put it somewhere where only you can find it. And whenever someone presents you with their feedback, make sure you check the list. So especially if you're endangered by this feedback and you think, maybe this person doesn't understand what I'm actually trying to do, it helps to have this list. Even if you don't have it written down and you only have it present in your mind, so you know, do I actually need to listen to this feedback, or can I maybe take it, say thanks, and give it away? The only thing you should try not to do is start justifying. Because the moment someone presents you with their feedback, here I want to give you that feedback. So for example, I believe your work is bad. Don't try to justify. Say thanks, right? Because if someone does that, they will always present you with something that they see. And it might in fact be a blind spot, or it is just something that they have in mind. So it could also be that if someone presents you with feedback like this, I believe your work is bad, or I think you're going the wrong way, say thanks and think about what it actually is that you're trying to do. You don't need to justify for anything that you are putting out there, right? You don't need to justify for anything of that, especially if you have a creative approach. If what you're doing is something that maybe no one understands yet. There are so many people that are doing great stuff that at the time nobody understands. But a couple of years later, people will then figure out, oh look, she was actually just ahead of her time and we didn't get it. So keep that in mind. Where's my feedback? Keep that in mind when someone presents you with their feedback. And it's a little like if you're asking a child while she's painting, yeah, what are you painting? And she says, I don't know yet. Maybe you don't know yourself yet what you're creating. it's a bit, for me, it's a bit like that, right? I don't know what I'm creating at the moment. I just know that I'm passionate about these things, which is why I share it. So thanks, and all the best with figuring out feedback.